All right, we continue our team coverage this morning discussing, I almost said discussing, right? It's kind of what it felt like. Last night's first presidential debate for this year's election. President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden squaring off in Cleveland, touching on a number of important topics. Joining me live to break down some of this debate is Laura Merrifield Wilson, Associate Professor of Political Science at UIndy. Good morning to you. I know we're all tired, kind of staying up late to watch and kind of think what happened. First, just overall, as you wake up and kind of listening to everybody and what they're thinking and saying. I like to listen, though, mainly not to pundits and what they're thinking, but voters. What is your feeling after listening to what voters think?
Well, Angela, I think your term disgusting was right on. A number of people in the public responded just like that. It was certainly a raucous, very chaotic debate at certain points, and highly contentious. And I think there were many moments where people felt with the candidates talking over themselves, the moderator losing control, that it was hard to get a good sense of what the candidates really stood for in terms of policy and issues. And it just felt like an uncomfortable mess. Unfortunately, what we know as pundits is that oftentimes turns voters off and away. And they don't want to participate. They don't end up liking or supporting either candidate. And so that was certainly a concern, I think, coming after this debate, was that it was just so messy and contentious. How many people are saying they don't want to participate at all, or they just feel so disenfranchised by the political system.
The other side of that coin is to say the reason that it's so contentious is because it is so important and that the sides are so different and the way of the country going is different. That's another side of what people would say. My point being a major battle over Amy Coney Barrett, and the issue of that appointment shows again where we're going here as a country. What do you think about that conflict and kind of how they both stand on that issue?
Absolutely. That was one of the first things that was mentioned in the evening. And again, where you saw these really chaotic and kind of awfully confusing first 10 to 15 minutes. But I think you did see a real highlight between where Donald Trump and the Republicans stand on the issue versus, of course, Joe Biden and the Democrats talking about whether or not to go forward with the confirmation. Of course, we know Donald Trump has nominated Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But you saw a very different opinion between the Democrats and the Republicans on whether or not to go forward with the appointment. It just emphasizes this cultural polarization and this concern of which party's in charge and what they're allowed to do. And sometimes it feels like the rules almost change depending who's the one enforcing them.
Yeah, but you do make that point of who's in charge. And if you have a Senate that is controlled by Republican and a president who's Republican versus when President Obama was president, he was a Democrat, so they couldn't move forward with their nominee. That is an important point to make, and even that sometimes gets overlooked, I believe, right?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I think this is why people watch the debates last night. They say, oh, they're messy, they're chaotic, it's confusing, I'm not going to vote. No, this is exactly why you vote, because you do have control over the presidency and, of course, the Senate and the House. And the party that's in charge does have the right constitutionally to move forward. I understand the concerns about timeline and things like that. You talk about Merrick Garland and President Obama. He had a Republican-controlled Senate. President Trump right now has a Republican-controlled Senate. And obviously, processes move differently depending what party's in charge. So all the more incentive for voters out there to double check their registration, make sure they're prepared, and go vote in November.
I only have like 30 seconds, and I wanted to talk about the racial sensitivity clash. That was a hot point. Really quickly, your point on kind of what you took away from that.
Well, President Trump said stand back and stand by with regards to the Proud Boys. Now, he did say sure at the beginning of whether or not he would condemn racial insensitivity in these kind of groups. I think people are reading into it very different ways. And as one of the things you and I would talk about, depending where you are on the ideological scale, depending which party you represent, you're probably looking at that from a very different light. I think what's very clear is that it wasn't clear. It is very confusing. Yes. And that could be said certainly of those comments and where the candidates stand on those issues, but of the entire night and the 90 minutes of what was truly a chaotic and crazy debate.
Yeah, you think, okay, if you're a Trump supporter, your mind probably wasn't changed. If you're a Biden supporter, your mind was not changed. If you are an independent, you, again, like you said, you're kind of thinking, maybe there'll be number two. Will there be another debate now after that mess? So we'll kind of see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah. I think the voters certainly deserve one, but of course, it's not up to me.
All right, we'll see. Thank you so much. Until next time, we got to go to a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.